LeBron James was the MVP. He's the one that ultimately captured MVP for the Olympics, being named Olympics MVP. I thought Steph Curry deserved it.
First, let's talk about LeBron and Steph and their performances and why I thought co-MVPs would have been the way to go.
And it came down to Steph and LeBron, but primarily Steph is the only reason. Steph struggled early. He's the singular reason we won the gold.
The USA men's basketball team takes home the gold medal in the 2024 Summer Olympics. Two players from the team ended up on the Olympic All-Star 5 in Stephen Curry and LeBron James. Rounding out the 5 were Dennis Schroeder of Germany, Victor Wembanyama of France, and Nikola Jokic of Serbia. Of the two Team USA members, James ends up winning the MVP title. Should Stephen Curry have won that title instead? Hey, what's happening, everyone? This is Swish Culture. At 39 years old, FIBA has crowned LeBron James as the best player on the best team in the world. I will refrain from saying the best player in the world due to the fact that the NBA has handed out its most recent MVP honors to Nikola Jokic. Now, there doesn't seem to be any secret recipe in how FIBA determines who wins the MVP of the tournament. At least not anything different than what the NBA is doing anyway. The player with the most MVP votes is going to get the MVP nod, like it or not. What we'll discuss today are the details surrounding the voting and what each player contributed individually towards earning the MVP vote. Also, was anyone else on Team USA even close to Curry and James when it came to performing on the court or in MVP votes? For all the details, please be sure to watch the entire video. Before that, however, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Swish Culture for the most analytical and entertaining NBA content on the planet. Now get ready. You're about to get The 2024 Paris Olympics has come to a close, and one of the most exciting things to come out of Paris has been the pairing of some of the best players in the NBA to form one of the most ridiculous super teams of all time. Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, plus many more, all playing on the same team. Team USA came with a vengeance this season after losing the FIBA World Cup last year after recruiting its biggest NBA stars to participate in this year's games. While it was really fun to watch how things played out, there is a bit of controversy at the end. How does a 39-year-old man win the Most Valuable Player award in a sport that's dominated by young men in their 20s? We'll talk about that, but we'll also talk about whether or not this additional accolade was earned and whether or not there were better players. Stephon Marbury, a former NBA player, and Colin Cowherd of the Herd podcast both think that Stephen Curry deserved the MVP over LeBron James, the latter of whom makes a compelling case for Steph Curry to win the MVP. Now, those obviously aren't the only two guys, as a lot of social media feels the same way. So once we start getting into the numbers as well as impact each player had, we'll hopefully be able to determine who in fact was more deserving of this award. For context, only two players prior to LeBron James had been given this award. Those two players are Manu Ginobili for what he did for Argentina in 2004 and Kevin Durant back in 2021 during the pandemic. One interesting thing to note is that the Olympics MVP is based on the entire sequence of games from the group stages all the way up to the final game. This will be interesting for some NBA Finals MVP comparisons, which if you've been watching the league for a long time, you know exactly where this is going. The first thing we want to look at, however, is how these players performed. Between Steph Curry and LBJ, who performed better during the Olympics? While Steph Curry was the higher scorer with 14.8 points, LeBron James pulled down more rebounds as well as assists with 6.5 and 8.6 respectively, and by much larger margins. Now, obviously, box scores aren't everything. How about player impact? LeBron had a cumulative plus-minus of plus 84, meanwhile Steph Curry had a cumulative plus-minus of plus 86. While LeBron was unstoppable in the paint, making 78% of his field goals from two-point range, Curry was unstoppable outside, shooting 48% from three. When this was flipped, Curry was 57% inside the arc and LeBron was 30% outside. Their true shooting tally shows just how close both players are, with Curry shooting 71% being eclipsed by LeBron at just over 71% overall. So in raw metrics from start to finish, we see LeBron being a step ahead of Curry with more assists, more rebounds, and a higher true shooting efficiency, barely. Curry meanwhile has a higher plus-minus and has scored more points, but let's take it up another level. Some may say the group phase wasn't as competitive, and that was just a warm-up till we got to the quarterfinals. This is where the more meaningful games were played against the toughest teams. Granted, the US played Serbia earlier on, the stakes weren't as high. So how did these players perform when the toughest games were on the line? LeBron James put up 42 points in the 3 games versus Brazil, Serbia, and France, an average of 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 10 assists per game, shooting 17 of 25 from the field and hitting 3 of 6 threes. Steph Curry in those 3 games put up a total of 67 points, an average of 21 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, and 2 assists, while shooting 22 of 35 and hitting 17 of 26 triples, a whopping 65% efficiency from downtown on high difficulty and high volume. The true shooting percentage breakdown puts LeBron at an incredible 75% and Stephen Curry at a mind-blowing and unreal 89% shooting. Now, how did things look from the film room? Overall, LeBron played 24.5 minutes per game, while Steph was on the floor for just over 23. From the jump, and based on some highlights I'm not really allowed to share, as soon as Steph Curry gets into the half court, he's being face guarded. These guys know that there is no one else on Team USA as deadly as Steph in the half court, hence the reason why no one else gets this kind of attention on the offensive end. Aside from the first few games, Stephen Curry was Team USA's primary offensive weapon, with LeBron James playing a Draymond-esque type of role, albeit much better than Greenwood. Steph and LeBron would set double screens to throw off defenders and get Steph open for the shot. Throughout, however, LeBron continued to display his high game IQ in setting and reading plays, as well as taking advantage of the open lanes provided by Steph's gravity. One of the reasons LeBron did so well inside the arc was that teams had to guard the guy with the outside shot, making 50% of his pull-ups. What we really learned, however, was something everybody in basketball already knows. Pairing LeBron with Steph allows both players to be the best versions of themselves. Both players cover each other's weaknesses while playing great supportive roles to each other's strengths. Considering the two do not regularly play together, imagine what would happen if they were allowed to properly build chemistry. Both players dominated different parts of the floor in different ways, making it easier to describe how well they played together versus pitting them against each other. That being said, so far, it seems like a 1A to 1B matchup. Now, this 1A and 1B scenario did play out in similar fashion about 9 years prior when Stephen Curry won his first championship, but failed to secure the NBA Finals MVP title. This instead went to Andre Iguodala, whom many would consider to be the Warriors' second option in that series, not even a 1B. When Steve Kerr inserted Andre into the starting lineup, this turned the tide a bit for the Warriors. His defense on LeBron James, along with his ball handling combined with the Steph Curry-centric Warriors offense, allowed the Warriors to keep the Cavs at bay. Throughout the series, however, aside from a couple of off games, Curry was the Warriors' best player. At the end of the series, he had more points, rebounds, and assists than Andre, but it still wasn't considered enough. The 10-point differential between the two wasn't enough to offset Iguodala's defensive coverage of LeBron James. I did note one small aspect, however, and it's that Andre Iguodala had a higher positive plus-minus than Steph Curry at the end of the series, which didn't exactly help Steph Curry's case. Well, this is interesting considering Stephen Curry had a higher plus-minus than LeBron James at the end of the Olympics, so maybe that doesn't mean much. Oh yeah, and by the way, Iguodala was a Nike contract player at the time. Not that that had anything to do with it, of course, right? What about the rest of the players that could have qualified for the MVP voting? The best place to look at all the qualifiers would be the Olympic All-Star 5. Outside of Curry and James, we had Wemby, Jokic, and Schroeder. Jokic, the current NBA MVP, averaged 19 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists, dominating the box scores. Wemby put up 16 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 assists, and lastly, Schroeder for Germany had 17 points, 7.5 assists, and 2.5 rebounds. No other player on Team USA really came close to the numbers anyone else put up in the All-Star 5, so it goes without saying that they likely didn't get as many votes. So what about the MVP voting and how did those break down? The Olympic basketball MVP, per Brian Windhorst, was voted on by the media and FIBA experts.
I asked, how is the MVP chosen? And I was told that it's media voting, which the media could vote on. There was a QR code allegedly on the wall. They opened the voting during the semifinals, and I was like, well, why would you vote now? But I was told media voting and, quote, FIBA experts.
Voting actually opened up during the semifinal matchups well before the gold medal game, allowing MVP votes well before the conclusion of the games. In this sense, the voting could be considered more like the NBA regular season MVP voting, in that players don't need to participate in the most important games of the season, the playoffs. The MVP also doesn't need to be on the team with the top seed either, as how far you go in the games seems to play a small role as long as you make the postseason with a couple of spots to spare. This approach allowed some media voters, whomever they are, to vote on the best player in the basketball Olympics before the game's conclusion, something that would, in my opinion, need to be quite obvious to make a decision. I haven't exactly subscribed to this idea, however, as Nikola Jokic was well ahead of LeBron up until Serbia was eliminated, so unless there is some type of conspiracy, final voting wasn't until after the Olympic basketball finals. Considering that the Olympics has only issued this in 2 other scenarios in history, it makes one wonder the true reason behind handing out this award to LeBron James, considering how closely both he and Stephen Curry performed. It could be argued that the award is meaningless considering they went almost 2 decades without handing one of them out. Either players were undeserving or fans didn't care. The reason could be anything. With the US recruiting its best players to suit up for the men's national basketball team, however, isn't it obvious that their sponsors could become involved? Surely Nike didn't have anything to do with this. Surely they didn't apply any behind-the-scenes pressure to ensure their athlete got this award and separate him from the only other competition, right? Now, if they did do this, who can really blame a sporting apparel company for applying a bit of pressure to get themselves more exposure and sales? Why else would an Olympic MVP award be handed out this season? Who was more deserving of this Olympic MVP? Post your thoughts below. But before that, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all your notifications so you don't miss any of my latest uploads. Thanks for watching. Till next time, swish!